Okay, now for our final speaker. I think many of you know Rick Tumlinson. He's somewhat of a legend in the commercial space industry, kind of one of the early supporters of commercial space. He's very recently helped to co-found Deep Space Industries, where he's the co-founder and chairperson. And he told me, and of course he was going to speak last year. He probably doesn't want me to tell this story, but of course he missed his plane last year, so he wasn't able to give his speech last year, so he was able to come this year. So I want to introduce you to Rick Tumlinson. He has some interesting, we're all accustomed to Rick talking about commercial space, but he's come a long way over the last few years, and he's really become an advocate for Mars. I know he's been an advocate for Mars for a long time, but most people don't associate him with this. So I think you're going to hear today that Rick is very much an advocate for Mars. So Rick. Sorry, a little jumbled there. But
thanks. 1, 2, 1, 2. You got to do that, right? Don't fence me in, man. Just don't fence me in. Jeez. I guess, well, I want to start with, it was funny. I got to tell you, I have a friend of mine, a little more cynical than I am. I told him I was going to do this conference, and I said, yeah, I think, Boeing's one of the big sponsors. And my friend said, oh, man, the reason they're doing that is because Mars is like their next big gravy train. And I shuddered. I mean, oh, God, the cynicism of such a comment. I mean, how dare he say that? And then I thought about it for a moment, and I thought, you know what? Fine. I don't care if it's the gravy train. As long as what we're doing now gets funded and done in such a way that the land where the track where the train is going to go gets surveyed, that the tracks get laid, and that the trains get to travel on those tracks, and that those trains are capable of carrying people like you and I. Fine, let the gravy flow. I'm happy with it. Right now, I'm wearing my hat for DSI, and I want to talk about a couple of things. But first, let me, you know what? I'm going to do a talk about DSI. I'm going to talk about a lot of other things. So let me run a video, if you could, right now. I'm trying to get this fixed. Let's see if this will do it. Make video go now. That's what they're going to say on the launch pad. Make rocket go now. Okay, it actually has audio. You know what? Screw it. Forget the video. Abort. We can just kill it, go to the next slide. This is for me, this is my punishment for making those guys back there crazy. All right, here we go. And there we are. First, a little commercial. I'm throwing a party. Some friends of mine are throwing a party on July 19th at one of the film studios in Hollywood. It's called Up. We're going to finally have an annual party that celebrates the human space program, as in terms of Apollo and things like that. It'll be celebrated the last Saturday before the Apollo anniversary, hopefully for 1,000 years. Hopefully they'll be celebrating it on the moon and Mars at some point. I am, of course, dream no small dreams. I'm rebranding the Apollo anniversary from the day an American first stepped on the moon to a day human beings first began to explore another world. There is a website. We're just getting it in gear, and I look forward to all of y'all coming. This is going to be a real rockin' party. Picture electronic dance music, DJs, big screens like at a U2 conference or concert, and very little speaking. So anyway, this is the reason deep space is in business, because space, when you get to space, stuff is really expensive. Now, the other reason we're in business is because it's a pretty dangerous place. And it's interesting to be able to both create wealth and save the planet. So that's why we have a company. We have a lot of information that I'm not going to tell you right now. And some of it would have been in the video. You can go to the website and check that out. One of the interesting things that happens with me a lot, though, is I get accused of being an asteroid guy or I'm a space colony guy. I worked for a guy named Gerard K. O'Neill. He was my boss, one of the greatest minds I ever encountered. I get accused of being all kinds of different things. I helped found an organization, the Space Frontier Foundation, that were anti-government, pro-commercial, a lot of different things. I had a company called Lunacorp. We worked on trying to get rovers on the moon back in the 90s. Once again, in competition with my great friend Peter Diamandis. He had a company called Blastoff. None of us succeeded at that point, although we did get the first commercial ever shot on the space station. I took over led a team, and we took over a little thing called the Mir for a few months. Tried to set up the world's first commercial space facility, got our asses kicked. But along the way, as a means of paying rent, we came up with a way of flying a guy named Dennis Tito, who flew a few months later. Formed a little spacesuit company, just signed a deal with Midland, Texas. Groundbreaking will occur this year. And just for my creds for the Mars side of things, I want you to understand, I helped get a group called the Mars Society, you may have heard of them, their first $100,000 by which they were able to start the society. Now, interestingly, the guy in charge of the Mars Society kicked me off his board 1 week later because I dared use that other M word, moon. So the proof is that we're right there, FINDS, Foundation for the International Non-Governmental Development of Space. So I know some of this stuff, and I want to talk to you about the why of space. Now, one of the key things that we forget is the why we're doing these things, because that's the core. But it's much more fun to talk about technology, who's got the biggest, baddest rocket, these kinds of things. And we get really caught up in these sorts of activities, and we forget the why. And it is the why that determines everything else. We went to the moon at one point. We had a why, and that why led to this. We went to the moon because we wanted to prove we were the biggest, baddest kids on the terrestrial block. We achieved it. That was why we went. And when we were done, all we had was flags and footprints, and a few years later, a Fox television show that caused a generation of kids who grew up since then and saw it in black and white to question whether we ever went in the first place. Now, if we don't get the why straight moving from here on out, about 40 years after this happens, if it happens at all, there'll be a Fox 3D broadcast probably beamed right into your brain that will question the fact of whether we ever went to Mars. And an entire generation will wonder how we could have ever pulled that off. It couldn't happen. You know, the whole moon thing, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the shadows might be wrong or this or that or the exposure of the film, and you've heard all this stuff. The reason people question that we ever went to the moon is that we're not there now. Why aren't we there now? Because we didn't answer the question why the right way. This is why we go to space. This is why we're going. And this is an answer a group of very, very, very smart people came up with. The goal of sending humans into space is settlement. We will create self-sustaining and economically viable human communities beyond the Earth, an expanding frontier where the power of human imagination can be unleashed, and a future where the human race can tap the unlimited resources and energy of space to create wealth and opportunity for all humankind. That's awesome. That sounds like the old L5 society. Sounds like a bunch of hippies smoking pot in a jacuzzi in San Francisco or something, coming up with some sort of, wow, rainbow future for us all. But you know what's interesting? This was the unanimous conclusion of almost every working group. Some of you were here at a NASA workshop that was held under Mike Griffin in 2004. This was the one conclusion that every group, Planetary Society, Mars rover people, the gentleman who was just given the award, he was in my group, all right? Lori Garver, God forbid, Bob Zubrin. I mean, everybody was in the room together, in different rooms, I should say, and all of the groups came up with this as their conclusion. Now, interestingly, the administrator and the deputy administrator weren't there the day we all gave our conclusions, but this is what we came up with. This is the reason you go into space. So one of the things we have to do early on and stay on and keep pounding until we get it sunk into the heads of everybody that has anything to do with this is the why. Now, one initiative that is underway right now is the Space Settlement and Development Act of 2015. And there are some of us that are working, it isn't a Space Frontier Foundation project, I should say, yet, but there are many of us from the group that are working on it. Now, part of this is the fact that in 1988, you may not know it, but from 1988 to 1992, there was a law passed called the Space Settlement Act of 1988. It was literally the law of the United States, introduced by a liberal Democrat, signed by Ronald Reagan, no less, that stated that the goal of the United States in space was human settlement. We had it. We, the community who wanted to go make this happen, had it in our hands. And what did we do about it? We got into a fight over a rocket. We ignored it. We fought about technology. And in the meantime, it was quietly gotten rid of in the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1992. We can't let that happen. We have to stay on it. We have to stay with the reason why. Now, what is a settlement? I get a lot of people that ask me about this. What is a settlement? This is my definition. This is from Rick's Handy Dandy Guide to Space, a book that will never be written, but one that is very dear to me and probably the best unwritten book ever. Settlement is what occurs when, by the way, I knew I was coming to a Mars conference, so I changed some of the text to red during the rest of the presentation because I knew that would resonate with you more. Settlement is what occurs when people move into a place that is beyond the borders of civilization and begin to live there and create a community, not just as visitors, but as residents who consider the new place to be their home. Keyword, home. It's not about the numbers of exports and imports and all this arcanery. It is if where you are is the home, or is your home, and that other place you're looking at is not. That makes you a settler. You are not a settler if you're on a shift, tour of duty, or going home to another place when you're done doing what you were doing where you are. You are a settler when the place you are is your home. These guys were not settlers. All right? The 19th century equivalent of astronauts were not settlers. That's Lewis and Clark. These people were settlers. They were going there to live. Many of them, well, all of them, on a one-way trip that was mentioned earlier. This guy is not a settler. He might have thought himself to be an entrepreneur. I don't know how it went for him. Probably not well. These people are settlers. This is not a settlement. It is an outpost. It is a base. It is a laboratory. But it is not a settlement. This is a settlement. 10,000 people living as a community in a place they call their home. So once we've started to agree on what a settlement is or what it means to be a settler, then let's look at some basic principles. 1, space is a place, not a program. 2, in free enterprise democracies, opportunities are exploited by individuals or groups in the form of companies and private institutions. 3, frontiers are not opened by governments for the people, but by the people, supported by or in spite of their governments. And without low cost and extremely reliable regular access to space, there can be no frontier. Oh, I should have done that last one there. Hang on. There is no reverse. That's sort of like the frontier movement. So we have requirements. Regular, reliable, and low-cost access to and from space. The utilization of this is an important one, of the resources of space, wherever they are, for whatever purpose we need, by whomever is willing to do the work. We need a government that understands and supports the idea of an open and expanding human frontier in space by, of, and for the people, or we have to go around them. And that makes everything slower, a little bit messier, and people get shot. And you need the right to own the place you live and give that place to your children. Now, the way we can do this is a clear understanding of the fact that the government has certain things it will do, and the private sector has certain things it will do. We have certain characteristics that are shared to some degree, but are not shared to all degrees. And if we can work together, then we can get some amazing things done. Up until now, we've been really, really bad at that. So we need to create a new partnership. Some of the ideas that I'm tossing on, these are just ideas. You know, everybody has their own pet thing. There are some things that I'm absolutely solid are the way we have to go, and then there's sort of my own concepts of what I believe we should do. I believe we need to hand off low Earth orbit. I do believe we need to put out an L-point station somewhere beyond the Van Allen belts, and I'd like to see it be a joint facility for the private and public sector. Maybe that's a place where DSI or PRI could be working on their asteroid mining techniques. That's not going to happen with robots. I don't know if you've ever watched any of these gold mining or mining shows on Discovery or whatever. 3/4 of the time, they're just trying to get the broken crap out of the gear so the machine will work, right? There's a guy just, okay, let's go to a commercial. Maybe we'll get this fixed, you know. All right, that's what's going to happen in space. This ain't going to be done by robots initially. We're going to have people out there. It'd be cool if we were sharing the cost with the with the government sector that's trying to figure out what happens when you live beyond the Van Allen belts. Then we go to the moon. I like the idea of going to the moon for a couple of reasons. I think you need to be in a high radiation vacuum environment that's dirty with gravity. And I think that's a great place to practice. The idea here of a dual moon base was one that I think Bob Richards and some other people have also talked about, is we go to the moon, we set up an initial moon base, and then NASA and the governments that are going to Mars set up another moon base on the far side where they're out of view of the Earth, and they get to practice camping and doing all of that stuff. And the people that are in the control of it, their managers, et cetera, are living in the first one, which is a dual-use moon base. In other words, you have HABs that are being built by and operated by the commercial sector. Now, the beauty of that is we get to do some very interesting things, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Space-to-space propulsion, solar electric power, nuclear, solar sails, working on a project in that realm right now. I don't care, as long as it gets you there. And as long as it gets you there, hopefully quickly, and is usable and cheap. And I believe that we have to go to Deimos first, but that's just me. Now, that's if it's a government program. Private sector, and you can go one way, what the heck? Mars surface follows that. And as I said before, as I'm saying here, there's the wild card. What is the wild card? The wild card is the thing you don't expect to happen, and it's not in the government program, i.e., the rest of us. That was fancy. Okay. This was a wild card back in the 80s. A former astronaut, Joe Allen, came up with a thing called the Industrial Space Facility. It was going to be a human-tended place where we could do all kinds of cool experiments, pharmaceuticals and all kinds of things like that. It was a wild card. At the time, it threatened the space station. It was killed. It was crushed like a bug. We did MirCorp. At the time, we threatened the space station. We were crushed like a bug. So we have a space station now. I called it Alpha Town in testimony to Congress in the 1990s, and I laid out some ideas at that point as to how we could leverage off of the fact that we had a facility. And what could we do that we could use those tax dollars in a way that would grow a community? The analogy in my mind was the idea of the Lewis and Clark's exploring, and then let's say the government puts a fort out in the frontier, way beyond the edges of civilization. And that fort, then, a trading post springs up around it. You cut to 100 years later, and you have a little tiny fort, which is a tourist destination in the middle of a city. And I called that Alpha Town, the idea of growing from that, how we could work together, how we can leverage. So the government fort on the frontier right now is ISS. And I'm a big supporter. It's very ironic. I fought against Space Station in 1992. I tried to get it killed. In fact, I talked to my NASA friends, and they talk about that was the year we saved the station by 1 vote. And then on my side, that's the year we almost killed the station by 1 vote. Because Reagan had said it was going to be done in 4 years for $8 billion, and we thought it might be going off the rails. I don't know. Go figure. Now, ironically, I'm a huge supporter of keeping it up there now for the same reason. See, if you have a frontier mentality, you don't throw things away. You recycle things, like aluminum cans. Oh, we have a pretty big one here. Let's recycle it. So that's phase 1. Well, phase 2. The government, having this fort, starts to buy stuff from the private sector. Buy stuff. Then you buy stuff from more than one person. So you create an industry, and you don't get caught up in, we have a contractor relationship. And then you help the private sector make better stuff. That's what NASA in its old NACA role used to do. It used to help the private sector build better aircraft. This is coming, by the way. This is Paul Allen. It's going to be pretty cool. And then we let 1,000 rockets fly. competition, get people flying, all kinds of stuff happening. I mean, he's a friend of mine, but I don't want just one Elon Musk. I want Bezos and Elon fighting it out. I want Sierra Nevada coming in there and giving it to them. I want them all going for it, okay? And I want them to be freaked out that the Chinese are out there. Maybe the Chinese get freaked out by them. The one thing I certainly do want is to get commercial spaceflight going so we don't have to depend on the guys that don't wear badges and invade other countries over in the Ukraine to carry our people into space. But I want us to have a place where we can try our stuff out. This is the Bigelow module that was mentioned earlier by Buzz, this little round thing. Give us a place where we can work, where we can leverage, where we can build. And then come out and rent some stuff from us in the private sector once we get it going. We can work together in these ways. And then, of course, after a while, you start getting your community. This is, by the way, just one building in the community. That's what can happen if we do it right. And so then we go out to the far point, waypoint, whatever it was called. Boeing actually is a big proponent of this, and I totally agree with them. The idea of a station out at the L points. And we do the same recipe again. Let's not have all the fights we've had over the last few years. Commercial versus private, or versus government. Let's work together. We can work together. We just repeat the recipe. And then the baby will be born in space. Now, it's starting to happen again regarding the moon, but it's also happening in LEO. And frankly, right now, you're living in the time. In the next 2 years, mark my words, the next 2 years, maybe 3, is the tipping point that people will look back on as the time when this started. Because within the next 2 years, Google Lunar X Prize teams are going to start getting ready to fly. Virgin Galactic is going to fly. High net worth, high value, highly opinionated, people who people pay attention to, like Brad. And they're going to go up and they're going to see the Earth and they're going to have the experience of a lifetime. It's going to start being cool. Planetary Resources, Deep Space Industries, all these others and a few others that, like Shackleton and some of these others that you know, don't fit into acronyms, like Mr. Stern's Golden Spike. A great effort with a lot of good stuff going on. And it's going to be interesting because it might get there ahead of you now and then. It might get ahead of NASA. You know, there's a sequel to the mouse that roared called The Mouse on the Moon, where the little country gets there before the Russians and before the Americans, and they're sitting there and they offer them to come over and have some tea. This could happen. This is what you want to happen. It isn't something that NASA needs to be afraid of, but should celebrate. This is not something Congress should be leery of, because God forbid our citizens get out of control and go somewhere and do something cool. How topsy-turvy is that logic? Think about it. Now on the moon, like I said, I want to see a two-based solution. I want to see NASA get there, learn how to set it up the first time, work with us, get moving on that. Then we get into more of something on the far side where NASA can go practice for going to Mars. By the way, every habitat you see that's on the surface that isn't covered with stuff is just really like, you know, one of those cutaway things. Because you're not going to be living on the moon, you're going to be living under the moon. You're not going to be living on Mars, you're going to be living under Mars. Talk to a doctor. So the community starts to grow. Oh, there we go. And again, baby's born. Mix and repeat. So now we want to go to Mars. We really have this set in our mind. Again, I'm not anti-Mars. I'm very much pro-civilization in space. There was a division back in the old day. O'Neill and Sagan were on two different sides of this. Sagan, who initially didn't even want people to go into space, had a real problem with Dr. O'Neill, who wanted people to live in space, and it turned into this thing, and it's history. It's history. It's all about why we go, to expand civilization. I don't care when we go to a new world whether you're going to Dakota, what will become Dakota, or you're going to California or Vermont. I just want to go to the new world. I believe we should stop for gas here. I think that Mars itself might be a bridge too far for the government. See, the government wants to go and bring people back, and that gets really, really, really expensive. If you're going on a one-way trip, that's a whole different thing. So we can go for the glory after we stop for gas, learn how to operate, do tele-robotics, et cetera. Again, you're going to hear so much about this stuff, I don't have to get into it. And yeah, my slides are just going crazy here. There we are. We repeat the recipe. By the way, these are done by one of the co-founders of Deep Space Industries, Brian Versteeg. All this artwork you see of these Mars habs is Brian's work. He's an artistic genius and a really, really nice guy, probably because he's Canadian. We grow a new civilization. The baby's born again. If we can work together, if we work in appropriate roles and do the appropriate jobs, if we know why we go to settle. And then let's try and communicate this to the people down the road here in Congress and let them know why. Let them know how important this is. Because unless they get it, see, we're our own worst enemy. All of our communities, we're our own worst enemy. Because we all walk into Congress and we get the ear of the congressperson and we say, I've got it figured out. Now, I just want to tell you guys, I am the smartest person in the room. I've got it figured out. Now, that's really unfortunate because every one of you is also the smartest person in the room, and that's going to cause a little bit of conflict. So we have to go down the hall, down the street, and we go to Washington, and we convince them that we've got it figured out and everybody else is an idiot, right? We've got it figured out. I have a NASA center in your district, Congressman. My people have this figured out. Those guys are idiots. I have a company in your district, Congressman. I've got it figured out. Those people are idiots. And by the way, the center here is also competing with me, and they're idiots too. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to go to free space. Let's do it all. Let's create a united message that says the goal is settlement. That is why we're going. We can't have every new president come in and redefine what space is every 4 years and do anything. We can't have this whipsaw all the time. I can love Mars, I can love the asteroids, I can love the moon, and I can still work with you. All right? Because we're getting hit by the same radiation, we're in the same damn vacuum, and we got to make it that first same damn 100 miles. So we have to unite. Now, this is what we do when we're trying to explain this stuff to people. We come up with the reasons. Free space and LEO. Political reasons, strategic reasons, it's the high ground. It's about science, planetary defense. They don't all fit all the different places, and I'll get to that in a second. And then we have the economics. You know, the dollars where you're paying for the Buck Rogers. Now, in free space, it's the environment, it's resources, it's tourism, it's energy, space, solar power, whatever. So we can make a pretty good argument for ways to make money in LEO and free space. We go to the moon, you get some of the same ones. We got politics, it's the high ground, it's politically cool. You got science, we can learn about the solar system, and we have some economics, because there might be some ways to, you sell some tourist type rides. I hate that word, but things like that. By the way, just a quick side note. Calling somebody who goes into space a tourist is one of the worst ideas we've ever had. Okay? It trivializes what is probably the beginning of one of the most important exercises in the history of the human race. Just keep that in mind. We can talk about a tourism industry, but you'll notice Disney never says, come be a tourist. Hawaii never says, come be a tourist. They have a tourism industry. They don't call the people who are coming tourists. Because a tourist is somebody in a flowered shirt with 4 cameras around their neck, a string of Orangina bottles behind them, urinating on a monument. That is not a great way to sell space. And if you do that and you stay with that kind of mindset, you end up with movies about rich people moving into space and the rest of us living in the garbage can. I think there was one last summer. Mars. Science, great reason. Strategic, political, it's not really the high ground. You can't really protect or hurt the Earth from there, so you don't really get that one. And the economic argument, and this is going to make some of you really crazy, there isn't one. I've founded 2 or 3 space businesses. I've looked at this and that, and I've been around this field a while. There really isn't an economic reason, an obvious economic reason in advance that we can think of for going to Mars. But see, this is the trap we get into because we try and rationalize these things in this way. There is no economic direct strategic or planetary defense bases to support the settlement of Mars. Now, people will say, but we can export the ideas we come up with to learn how to live on Mars. I just was going to go to California and go, dude. Now, the reason that doesn't work is because the people on the moon are going to be exporting their cool ideas too, and the people in free space are going to be exporting their cool ideas too. There isn't anything you can come up with at Mars that you can export back to the Earth that is going to make you the kind of money you need to do Mars. That's not the reason we're going. See, we make up all this stuff because we want to sound rational. See, I know that everybody out there that I talk to, when I talk to space business people, when I talk to government people, aerospace people, they're all very, very serious. They want their business plans to close. They have their quarter, they have to, they have to take care of the funding for their center. Everything has to close. Everything has to be something that appeals to an accountant, or the accountant that the staffer or the congressperson or the investor or somebody else will call. We have to always fit into that. But I know that that's not why you guys are in this room. You're not in this room because it makes economic sense. I'm not in the space business because it makes economic sense yet. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, you might notice something about these guys. It's just a little detail. They already have their money. They're not doing it to make money right now, not in the first iteration. You're in this room. The government people, the staffers, the people who are involved in space are in this field. The person at the cubicle at Boeing or in the corner office at Lockheed Martin is in this field because somewhere inside of them is an 8 to 12 to 14-year-old kid sitting on the floor watching Star Trek, watching Apollo, watching Star Wars, with their eyes wide and believing that something incredible lies ahead of them, and wanting that so bad that they're willing to put up with the crap that we go through and that we create ourselves in this field and stay in it their entire life because they believe, because you believe. This is a dream. It's not something that you can do on a spreadsheet. It's great when it works, but that's the test of Mars. See, Mars is actually, in a sense, going to be, the human settlement of Mars, perhaps the first post-economic frontier. Because it doesn't make money. It's almost a religious thing. It is a philosophical thing that drives us to Mars, if you want to live there. The science stuff, that's all good. That's absolutely great. So we have to come out of the airlock. We have to admit the real reasons. We go into space because it's there. We go because we want to go. We go because it's inspiring. It gives us a hope of the future. Without the frontier, the world that we are selling the next generation is an ever-narrowing set of choices, and it goes like this. When you open the frontier, it goes like that. It is a complete transformation of what it means to be a human being living on this planet and facing the times ahead. It's inspiring. We go because there's something inside of us, something maybe way down below the genetic level that calls us to go. It's because we're living creatures. Have you ever seen how hard living creatures fight to survive? Lichen? Any creature that's out there, any living species in a universe that's trying to kill them, fights to survive. And one of the elements of survival is making yourself unkillable. And being unkillable means expanding beyond the domain and range that you're in, so if something happens to that place, your species can't continue. We go because it's why we're here. This is where we are. We go to Mars, we go to the asteroids, we go to the moon because of this place right here. Because we love this place. We are of this place. We're the stewards of this place. We're the creation of this place, and now, in a sense, the creators of this place. We are living beings in a universe that at most is at least dead and beyond that possibly hostile. It is our duty. It is our destiny. Yes, I'll use the D word, destiny. I've already used the S word, settlement. God forbid. Think about how people are going to look back at this conversation in 150 years or 200 years or 1,000 years when they're sitting in these places, if we succeed before we wipe ourselves out. Always a good question. But they're going to sit in these places and they're going to think about, they actually thought this was a question? Really? We are here to go there. Because that pale blue dot hanging in the space of the universe, that pale blue dot that was given to us in a picture by the Apollo astronauts, represents something important. This is why we go to the asteroids. This is why we go to the moon. It's why we go to Mars. It's why I'm in this. And you know what the beauty of this frontier is? The beauty of this frontier is that for the first time, we're not going to take it from somebody else. For the first time, we get to go together. All of us, any of us, we can go. We can make it happen. We can take the light of life and fill the places that are now dark. We can take the seeds of life and plant them in places that are now dead. That is not just a mission for a lifetime, that is a mission for a civilization. And as soon as we get our act together and get that message out to the world, that this is why we go, this is what we want to do, this is why we are here, what we are about, who we are, then not just the solar system will be ours, but the universe. It's not about one small step. It's about a journey. And the journey starts with people like you in this room, leaving this room and getting out there and explaining it to those other people, and explaining it to them, and explaining it to them, and showing them how it can happen. And having a conversation like this. Because you know they don't get you. If you're like me, you go home for Thanksgiving, and you're standing around the table, and you're trying to explain to people, they don't get you. But in the heart of every human being is this. And if you explain it the right way and show it to them the right way, they'll share it, they'll get it, and we'll be on Mars in our lifetimes. Because it's all about that. Thank you. Thanks. I'm sure people want snacks, but I mean, yeah, I guess I'll take a question. Sure, I don't usually, but fine.
How you doing? I'm Dave Ruck, and
Hey, Dave.
that was great. And I want to know how I can buy you a beer. And I need to get you to see my new film that we showed last night, which is called I Want to Be an Astronaut, which I think goes in line with a lot of the things that you're trying to say. So I just wanted to thank you publicly because that was a great speech, and I totally agree. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you. You have to buy me a Coke, 5 years sober.
I wanted to say kind of the same thing. I thought that was a great speech, and I wanted to know if you would be around afterwards to talk about anything?
Yeah, I'm going to be around for the next 3 days. Yeah, I could stay in Washington about 3 days before I need decontamination.
Will you be around in here, like
Yeah,
downstairs?
I love this
or anything?
town. I love this town. I'm totally kidding. Pardon? I'll be here, and I'll be at the Google thing, I think, and sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you guys. Thank you. It's my honor. Thanks. Awesome.
Thanks, Rick. That was great. And he specifically requested to be the last speaker. He told me he would be able to energize the crowd at the end of the day, and I think he did. So thank you very much, Rick. That was terrific. So that's the end of our first day.